Hey everyone, welcome back to What the Deaf podcast.
We are so thrilled to have Ben Shelton here with us today. So Ben is a writer, producer, director within the entertainment industry, and we are absolutely excited to have this open dialogue with you and learn a little bit more about you. Before we go ahead and jump into this amazing conversation, we want to know you a little bit more. And how did you get to What the Deaf podcast?
I'm a listener. I'm a viewer of What the Deaf podcast. I found you guys online in my deep dive into learning sign language and learning about deaf culture. And you know this. I'm a fan. So thank you for having me because it literally is an honor to be here.
We are so excited having you on this podcast. Seriously, when you reached out to us before to talk about your fascination with deaf community and culture, it really opened our eyes with how amazing you are to just ask those questions and want to get involved. And I'm curious, what made you decide to be fascinated with deaf community? How did you get started with all of that?
Great question. So, look, if I go back to college, when I was in college, I was student body president my senior year. But the year before that, my junior year, the president before me was deaf. He was a deaf man, and I got to know him, and I obviously knew him a lot through his interpreter. I went to college a while ago, and we didn't have FaceTime or any of that. And so I remember the call when he called me to say that I had won student body president. The phone call was a traditional phone, and it was his interpreter's voice. And so there was always kind of I've always had an understanding a little bit of that, of kind of interpreters and deaf culture, like teensy bit. It wasn't like I'd never met someone. Years later, I saw Josh Castile in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I'm a big theater guy, and I saw him at the Fifth Avenue Theater in Seattle. Absolutely loved that performance. But if I'm being perfectly honest, it wasn't until COVID, and I'm sitting here by myself, and a guy that saw one of my films, he saw my movie Candy Jar on Netflix. He sent me a message online and said he wanted to be a director. And I was like, oh, cool. I get messages from people from time to time that want to learn about filmmaking. And so I checked out his social media, and it was all these really funny little skits with a deaf man performing. And I asked him, he said he wanted to be a director. I said, are you the person in all the skits? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, it looks like you're an actor. You're not a director. You're an actor. You're a wonderful, funny, hilarious deaf actor. And he said, yeah, okay, sure, but I really want to be a director. Anyway, he and I became friends, and this is very early in sadly in the pandemic. It's still weird to say that. In the beginning of COVID, and he reached out to me. We connected. We became friends over Zoom. And then he introduced me to some more deaf friends and hard of hearing friends and CODA friends. And pretty soon I had some deaf, CODA, hard of hearing friends, as well as hearing interpreters. And then that was that moment where, as a hearing person, I was like, you know what? This is COVID. We're all sitting around. Why don't I learn sign language? It's about time. And as you know, it's so funny that, I think deaf people can make fun of hearing people, rightfully so, all the time, because they always say they're going to learn sign language, but never do. And so I took the time of saying, I'm going to start learning. Obviously, I'm not fluent enough to just go for it right now with you, but as you know, we've had a full hour-long conversation with no interpreter, and so that was a lot of fun.
It still amazes me to see how wonderful you are with signing right now. And that just shows the hearing audience that they can always learn and that it's not too late. I mean, look at yourself. You're a prime example. You can have a conversation with me back and forth. So you're getting there to become fluent. And maybe we can have a round 2 conversation where you sign without the interpreter. Who knows? So thank you again for your willingness to be motivated and learn, because that means so much to the deaf community. Not just that, but you also are within the entertainment industry. And I know there's a lot of deaf people who are so motivated and want to be writers or directors, but they just don't know where to start because they don't have people with knowledge or understanding of the deaf community. And now they know they have somebody like you that could make a huge, tremendous difference within our community. So it honestly means so much to us.
Well, thank you. And I did, I'm so far into it that I know that, American Sign Language versus signed English versus, SimCom. That's what
simultaneous communication.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, as you know, my brain just, but ASL, American Sign Language, signed English, SimCom. Those are 3 different things. And for me, I've realized, for me, I realized that it's actually easier to sign when I'm not having to speak at the same time. It's like if I just go into signing and not have to do so, it's one of those things where, anyway, you'd think like, oh, if I talk and sign at the same time, it's easier. Not for me. It's harder. It's, I can say a couple different words, it's harder, or my family, there's a couple things that are easy, but the brain of learning 2 different languages, because as you know, they work so different. And so anyway, I don't know what I'm saying, but that's, I do think that there's interesting thing about, acting and deaf culture and signing are both very visual. And so I do think that there's, we're seeing right now with TikTok, Instagram, so many wonderful deaf performers that are just so hilarious, so entertaining, that are using the medium we have now to really, show their stuff. And it's pretty awesome.
For sure. And I'm wondering too, after listening to our first season, what was your biggest takeaway that you found with listening with us? Did you discover anything new or anything like, oh my God, I didn't realize, or what was your favorite part?
See, I wasn't ready for this question. Highlights from season 1. Look, I loved season 1. I loved it so much that I've listened to it / watched it 1.5 times. For me, from a hearing perspective, it's great to watch it, obviously, when you're learning sign language, to be able to, there's not a lot of great, wonderful, videos where you can see the signing, hear a voice, and see the subtitle. Like all 3 of those things. I wouldn't say that's the best way to learn sign language, but it's interesting to see how you guys interpret and certain things that are said and how that works. But no, look, I think that what the Deaf Podcast was great for me was, it wasn't this is going to go against what you're doing right now, but what I loved was that it was two deaf people who were giving their own authentic experience and sharing their authentic stories. That's what my favorite thing was in season 1, was that it's completely authentic. It didn't feel like you guys were trying to say the right thing, or, you're just being authentic and showing different points of view. I've, as you guys know, you know everything when it comes to deaf culture. No, as you guys know, the term deaf, some people think, hearing people think deaf means 0 hearing whatsoever. That's what a lot of hearing people think deaf means 0 hearing. Now, obviously, I know, Carly, it is 0 hearing for you. But for Sarah, it's not. And I know, now I know many deaf people that it's not 0, right? And so that's something that is wonderful to see from your podcast. It's just educational.
You, as a person being within the entertainment industry prior to learning more about the deaf culture, and now that you have learned more about it, does that change your perspective of how important it is to authentically represent the deaf community within the entertainment industry? There's so many people who underestimate or think that, oh, one deaf person means all deaf people are exactly like that or the same. There's many layers within our community. So I'm curious what perspectives have changed for you after learning more about the deaf culture and seeing so many different layers. How can we appropriately represent all of them within the entertainment industry?
There's just so many ways to go with this. So I think it's very important to showcase deaf actors of all the different types of deaf actors in film and in TV shows. And during COVID, when I was jumping in and studying deaf culture, I was realizing how many great deaf characters I could put in a number of my shows and movies. And I also started writing brand new shows in movies about deaf characters. But what I think is there's kind of these two different versions. There's a character whose deafness is part of the plot line, and then there's a character who happens to be deaf. And I think that we're dealing with that a lot in films and TV right now. Is how much identity matters to a character is something we're asking all the time. And there's no right or wrong way to deal with it from my perspective. You can have a character whose deafness is the biggest thing in their life, because guess what? That character, maybe it is. But you can also have a character who forgets that they're deaf. They got so many other things they're dealing with. Their deafness is the last thing on their mind. As you could say about any isms, right? You could say, a character that is old, a character that is, there's every list. A character that's bald, a character that is a woman, a character that is a specific religion, a character that is ethnicity, sexual orientation. Any of these identifiers can identify you and embrace you, or they can be just one aspect of your character. And so for me, it's kind of important to share all the different stories. I mainly work in comedy. So what's fun for me is saying, here's a character who happens to be deaf, but really they're dealing with all these other things. That's a little bit more fascinating for me than having the deafness be a plot point.
I feel like that's a really beautiful thing that you said, is allowing the deaf person to play a character and not just play deaf, and having that be normalized. Oftentimes right now, deaf characters are the shining, trendy, like, oh my God, that person is deaf, without really taking the time to realize, no, that character can be a lawyer. That character is so much more than just deaf. And I've noticed, again, deaf people are now starting to have the spotlight in media, which has been amazing. But I'm excited to move forward with the new step of normalizing it, and just, oh, there's a deaf lawyer, but it's just a lawyer, or it's a doctor who just happens to be deaf. And trying to figure out how we can push for that to be more normalized. Any kind of disability, whether it's a wheelchair, whether it's anyone that's unique or different, that their character is just their character and their disability doesn't define only the character. So what do you think would be a good stepping stone to keep pushing for that?
It starts with writers. I mean, it really does start with the writers who just write a character and say, this character happens to be deaf, and then tell a story. Exactly what you said. It can be a comedy about a boat. It can be, it can be, it's a horrible example. A comedy about a boat. What am I talking about? But it can be a romantic comedy. It can be a mystery comedy. It can be a thriller. It doesn't matter what the genre is. It doesn't matter what the character does. Their deafness doesn't have to be a plot point. Now, their deafness will obviously affect the way the story is told. And so you need writers to do the research or or you need writers that are deaf and know this already to be writing these type of stories. The deaf man who reached out to me that wants to be a director, I asked him, do you want to be a writer too? And he said, no, he just wants to be a director. And so I'm like, oh no. Okay. So, but I'm sure you guys know, and there's lots of people out there, deaf people, hard of hearing people, people in deaf culture that are writers, and they want to, and I would recommend, that they just start writing for sure.
And this is why we have this podcast, What the Deaf, and we turned it into a production company in hopes of building that bridge within the deaf and hearing community so that they can come together and work together. Because oftentimes the deaf community, they lack access to classes. They lack access to just being able to get into the industry. So if we can build that bridge between the two communities, they can share their experiences and give them the opportunity to write their story about their community, their culture. And I think that would just be an amazing, beautiful thing to happen.
Okay, question for you. On one hand, it seems as though technology has really helped the deaf community. If you look back 20, 30 years, we didn't have Zoom and FaceTime. So certainly these things are very accessible and really help the deaf community. But there's still challenges. And I'm sure I was just on a Zoom the other day with a deaf person, but it was about 10 different screens on, for the Zoom. And it's hard to be looking back and forth, even with an interpreter, to go, wait, who's talking now? And I was curious if you guys in this Zoom world have been part of situations that have been tough.
Yeah. It's a weird feeling because I'm so used to it. I'm so used to asking them to repeat themselves, or I'm used to not being sure who's talking. And so it's not something that impacts me as much. But if I sit down and reflect and I say, oh, okay, well, hearing people have it so easy. I never had it that way. So yes, it's difficult, but I'm so used to it that it's my life. I'm always trying to figure out who's trying to say what. I'm trying to find the interpreter. We've got a house full of hearing people, and I'm always trying to, so I feel numb to it because it's how I live. So it's weird, but it is what it is.
Well, for me, it was the opposite experience, because with Zoom, I'm able to plug in my microphone that connects with my hearing aid, and I can finally understand more clearly than anything that's happened. From my deaf experience, it's been a gain for me. And that was, I wasn't used to it, because typically in like a huge assembly hall or in one of my acting classes, I would work so hard to understand people. And then when Zoom happened and I could just plug in, I'm like, wait, I can understand now. So I had the opposite reaction than Carly, which is very interesting.
Obviously, to hearing people, we don't know what it's like unless you're a hearing person surrounded by deaf people signing, and you're the only one who doesn't sign or only signs a little bit. For me, I'm learning sign, but when I am around, again, like you guys, and you're signing as fast as you're comfortable with, I obviously get confused and get lost. The other thing I noticed was that when I'm washing the dishes or folding the laundry, I'll be listening to a podcast and kind of multitasking. But during COVID, the multitask that I wanted to do was learn sign language. So I'd be trying to wash the dishes and then have a video up of trying to learn sign language, but you can't listen to learn. Your eyes have to go up. So now I'm like trying to like wash the dishes and keep my eye on the learning the sign language, or folding the laundry and learning this. And all of a sudden I realize I can't do it. And then it gave me a perspective. It gave me that learning perspective of realizing that if someone who is deaf and doesn't have hearing, how much they rely on their eyes and on their other senses. And so it was interesting. Me, as a hearing person, learning sign language, I felt like I got a small glimpse into to someone else's experience.
And again, like I said, this is the way that I live. So I don't notice those small things until I'm put into that position. I just moved in with her and I saw her, she'd FaceTime with her parents. And then, when there's a poor connection, they can continue talking. And I'm like, wait a minute, you can still hear even though you have a poor connection on your phone. I can't see the screen. It goes black or it freezes. She can still continue the conversation. And I'm like, oh, again, that puts me in a position. And I realize, oh, my life is not like a lot of people who have those advantages and can navigate through the technical difficulties while, no, I'm at a full stop, and I just have to deal with it until, and I just move on until somebody reminds me that, oh, I am deaf. I don't have a normal life like everybody else does. So.
No, hold on there. Your life is just as normal as anyone else's. Your life is normal. That is your normal. Okay. I remember when early on, I asked a CODA woman what it was like having two deaf parents. And her answer was very simple. It's normal. She's like, what would be weird to her was if she had two hearing parents. Now that would be crazy to her. Right. And so I think that's this thing that we all just have to remember, is that there really is no such thing as normal, or rather, there are 10,000 definitions of what normal is.
Beautifully said. And if everyone had that thought process, the entertainment industry would be a beautiful one where everything is just a different type of normal, that we don't question it or we don't think, oh, that's so different. I feel like sharing people's stories is what's such a beautiful thing, and the reminder that your life is your normal. And that is so well said. And I really appreciate you acknowledging that and saying that too.
I heard the term, instead of disabled, I heard different abled. And I like that. Anyway, that's just another to tack onto the different, all different versions of normal.
So now, you being a writer, producer, and director, you have a lot of responsibility in that area. And I'm wondering, how do you make your set a positive environment for people, whether they're hearing or deaf? What is your tendencies as a director or a writer or even a producer?
Great question. So I'm distracted because I'm watching you, Sarah and Carly. I'm not watching your sister. Thank you, sister. But no, I'm watching you guys. And because I'm still in that sponge mode of absorbing sign language, I'm like watching your guys' sign language and just kind of fascinated by, I'm like, oh, okay, she did that for that and this. And I'm always learning. So when you ask me a question, I'm like watching you sign and I'm like, okay, answer the question. Stop watching the sign.
It's the best way to learn.
Yes. So getting back, I will answer your question. I promise, Sarah. But learning sign language, I've learned, from Zooming and FaceTiming with my deaf friends, from reading books, from watching YouTube, from watching TV shows, and from your podcast. It's all of it. And then obviously practicing with my family and them being very annoyed that I'm doing sign language. Okay. So my uncle is a filmmaker. And so I definitely come from privilege in the sense that my uncle is Ron Shelton. He wrote and directed some famous movies, including Bull Durham, White Men Can't Jump, and Tin Cup. And so I definitely grew up with a sense of this is a job that is possible. It wasn't just some crazy idea. And so I got to see him on set, and he definitely was an example for me. But then when I first moved to Los Angeles after college, I was a set production assistant for 3.5 years. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's the person who's first to show up last to leave and least to get paid. I mean, it's literally the grunt job, the person that you're cleaning porta potties or that type of stuff. But so I got to see what a movie set was like from that perspective. And I got to see what the hair and makeup trailer meant and the way what grips were and electricians and the camera department and the actors and craft service and the whole thing. I got to see it from that perspective, from a PA's perspective. And that really helped me understand how people were treated. I was on good sets, I was on bad sets, and that really, really helped me. Obviously, I'm not a perfect person. I make mistakes, but I try to think of it from that point of view and learn how to, treat everybody with respect, because everyone's job does matter. You can't just show up with a camera and an actor. You need hair and makeup, you need costumes, you need set design, you need you need food, you need nourishment, you need a script supervisor. I mean, you need all of it. And so I had that background as a set production assistant. And then I also had the background of an indie filmmaker making films, short films for $0, just me and my brother, just me and my friends, and just making really small 5-minute short films for no money. And so the combination of being a producer, writer, director on a small budget thing, and then being a PA on a big budget thing, combining those is kind of how I'm working today.
That's amazing. So her question made me think of something. I saw a quote yesterday on Facebook, actually, and it said, if you as a writer want to write about a deaf character, but you can't provide the accommodations behind scene, it doesn't make sense. And I thought that was very powerful, because I know a lot of directors and producers and writers, they go ahead and bring in a deaf character, and then they'll say things like, I have low budget, I can't afford you an interpreter or an ASL master. So I'm like, okay, well, if you want to write about a deaf character or put a spotlight onto our community, you have to make it accessible. So I guess I'm curious, what's your way of navigating through that? Even if there's no budget, but you know the importance of providing those accommodations for a deaf actor.
Okay, so I can't speak for other people's experiences, but what I really can say is that's why you should really, stories are about relationships, and you should be working with people you know. And so if you're going to add a deaf character, well, why? Is it just because you want, is it because you just want to see a deaf person? Well, I think it needs a little more research done. I think you need to meet somebody. You need to have if just because, like, I guess this is what I'm trying to say. Good intentions aren't necessarily great ideas. I can want to write something that I know nothing about, doesn't mean I should write it. And so I think that if someone wants to include a deaf character, well, maybe before you start writing or hire someone, maybe you should do a little bit of research and meet some people and do that. Getting back to specifically your question about this idea that, providing access and interpreter on set for a show, well, if it's a big budget show, they can afford it. And if it's low budget, well, then maybe after you can meet someone who's deaf, who's a friend of yours, and maybe you meet an interpreter who becomes a friend of yours, and then you can create an environment that is easier and more accessible because you're doing something for lesser budget. Obviously, look at us right now. Right now, we have an experience where we have Carly's sister is our interpreter, and so I'm not sure what her rate is, but obviously it's affordable because you guys have a relationship. And so I think that really, filmmaking, a lot of my best filmmaking experiences come from relationships that I've formed organically.
Again, I'm just so curious because you're saying all the right things of relationships, of getting a deaf writer or having that authentic experience. But it's then, I feel like it's so hard. I'm like, I see it. Yes, let's do it. But then I realize I still feel that internal struggle of how to get through to the bigger platforms and how to show them that importance of representation, of accommodations, of all of that. I'm curious, what do you think for us as What the Deaf Productions, what can we do to continue this conversation, or how to reach the bigger platforms to let them know of the importance of a dialogue like this?
I mean, I really, this is not the answer you're looking for, but I feel the question you're asking is kind of like, how do we get to the top of the mountain instead of enjoying the journey, and it's like, it's, Will Smith, talks about, it's one, you build a wall. He's quoting a famous parable, but the idea of that you can't build a wall or build a house, without one brick at a time. And so I understand that it's overwhelming. I'm obviously the wrong person to give you the answer of how to, change the entire entertainment industry or culture. But I just do know that, that for me, it took one person, reaching out to me saying, I want to be a director during beginning of COVID. And that was that final straw for me that realized, yeah, I'm going to learn ASL now. That's what it was for me. And so I just think that what you guys are doing with What the Deaf podcast, because look, during my journey, I've been seeking, researching, researching information and stories about deaf culture and sign language. And I'll go into podcasts and I'll search deaf and I'll search, famous deaf people's names or deaf culture or, and your podcast, pops up, and that's wonderfully educational for me. It's accessible for all audiences and it's great. But there's not a lot. There really is not a lot. And so you guys already have done so much. And so just, thank you for doing that, because you are reaching hearing audiences and it's making a difference. But again, to answer your question, how can we change the world? I don't know. Of course I don't know. I'm only me.
We're working on that uphill battle, and we want to continue. Like we said, our goal is to normalize the media, the TV, the films, and it's not going to be overnight. We're just starting this process with season 2 of having these interviews and just opening that dialogue and having these conversations that need to be talked about, because I haven't talked to a lot of people relating to these issues and these topics in general. So it's nice to be able to hear from other people's perspectives, hearing in depth, to see what are the gaps and how can we fill it in step by step. Because I know it's not going to change overnight, but as long as we start that dialogue and continue that dialogue and never stop pushing for it and hearing people out, it will get better. It's just day by day. So, yeah.
In season 1, what you guys showed was that there is not one right way to be deaf, and that there's a lot of different perspectives. And a show like Deaf U, which obviously was on Netflix, and I know some people that watched it and loved it, and I know people that watched it and hated it. And you guys talked about one aspect of it, but one thing that people talked about was like, oh, it's just about young people sleeping with each other and all this, it's kind of dirty, and some deaf people were like, that's not how we want to be represented, is that way. And then other people I talked to said it's actually great because it shows deaf people in that normalizes them, that says, of course, they're just as normal as anyone else. And there was all these different perspectives on it. And this kind of, so with that show is just one example, but this idea of, you guys probably have your own opinions about the way you want deaf people to be seen and represented. and especially in media. But when you have a show, like Deaf U, really, I think it's just about college kids. It's like, doesn't matter if you're deaf or not. Here's just what college kids do. I think that's really what the show is about. But I was just curious what you guys think. Is there something really that you want to show that has never been seen about a deaf character on screen? Or is there something you're sick of? I know we touched on it a little bit, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
For me, I would say that if there's more deaf TV shows out there, then my reaction to that show would be different. Because there are not very many shows about deaf people. So that's one of very few shows that people see. And like you said, it's just a show about college people, but nothing to do with me. So hopefully that doesn't give the misunderstanding of people's perspective of who I am. If there was more storylines out there about deaf communities and deaf cultures and a variety of different options, and I can say, well, that's just one TV show that, about college life, but you can watch these other ones that are more relatable to me. So I think people's opinions and reacted to it, it's because there's a limited amount of shows out there about the deaf community. And the people in the deaf community are scared that that's the representation of deaf people. And that's what their perspective and thoughts are going to be in general.
Yeah. And for me, what I want to see is just more variety of deaf stories and showing, like what we said, there's not one right way to be deaf. There's many different types of deaf people. And like paralleling what Carly said is that I want to see more shows, more diversity within the deaf community, showing that our beautiful, rich culture is not just one large stigma of what deaf means. I want to see the variety of deaf people within media itself. So that's one thing, and more shows, obviously.
But I will add, from my understanding, Deaf U, the show, gave so many different opportunities for people to be a part of the entertainment industry. There was a lot of deaf people who worked behind the scenes as crew, as the cast, and those opportunities are amazing. And I'm very grateful for those opportunities that allowed the deaf world to have. And you don't see that very often, and they don't get those opportunities within other shows. So that's one huge advantage about this show, even though the show itself could be, a little different, and it might not meet everybody's expectations. But the fact is that they opened so many doors and opportunities for deaf people within the entertainment industry. I love that.
I love hearing that. One thing, just in season 1, your guys' dynamic back and forth together is great. I mean, you guys have great chemistry, and I love seeing and hearing you guys talk to each other. I did have a technical question. When you're that close together and you're turning and you're signing, are you too close to be signing to each other? Is that a little awkward?
I didn't think about that. Right now, we're very confined, but
yeah, but no, exactly. For right now, not in the show, in season 1, you guys were separate enough and you're looking at each other. But when you're that close, I can imagine if you're spelling something with your hand.
Love each other so much.
Your finger spelling. Look, I mean, I'm so slow on finger spelling. It's just like, that's so. I was just curious, that angle seems odd to me.
It's a little close. Like, I love you, Carly, but
love me too.
It's a little close. It's a little awkward, but we make it work. Again, it's Zoom live. We have to adapt. We have to kind of like figure it out. But we make it work in our confinement.
The things that I think, here's what I tell writers all the time, that who's your audience for the piece you're writing. I also tell this when talking to actors, if they're performing a scene or whatever, who's your audience? And I think that in season 1, it felt very, very much that your guys' audience was hearing people, and educating hearing people. And I'm curious, what is the goal? What is your audience for season 2?
Ooh,
I like that question.
I think we're hoping for both audiences. deaf and hearing audiences who are motivated to be part of the entertainment industry in general. And just to change little things within the entertainment industry and how we can make the industry a better place for everyone. Because right now, the deaf community is very trendy for a lot of people, but we're more than just a trend. I mean, we're more than just using ASL. We are human beings in this world that have our own stories. And we're hoping that this sends the message to audiences that we do have a lot of stories. And we do want to have this dialogue to build that bridge.
That's great. I was just curious. When it comes to, so I think that there's so many things that a hearing audience, that knows nothing about deaf culture, every time we watch someone who is deaf, sign, speak, experience, we learn something. For example, obviously, going back to Deaf U, in the first episode, they had the couple that was hugging and then signing and then hugging and then signing and I have two different thoughts. One was about deaf culture. One was about the deaf community. All right. So I'm giving you that's my chapter headings. So I think that I do have just something to say, because in the sense of we have a hearing audience. My advice for hearing audiences is that you don't want to just learn sign language. You want to learn about deaf culture. And because you can learn American Sign Language and learn, signs, and that's great, but it's really only halfway there. You need to learn about deaf culture. And I, again, am still learning. I'm obviously not an expert, but that's something I realized early on, is that I was learning sign language, I was talking to deaf people, and then I was also doing my research and studying about the history. And it's not a great history. It's sadly, it was one of these stories where we like to think that, that over time things get better. That's what I think we all want to think and hope. And I'm reading about deaf history in the 1700s, 1800s, and then I get to the 1900s and I'm like, what? And I'm literally reading and I'm start crying, because I'm like, there was this, and you guys can tell it, but there was this turn in the early 1900s towards away from sign language. And it was just devastating to know that literally in the last 100 years, we went backwards. And then luckily we've kind of come around. And again, not to say that there's a right or wrong way, but it seemed like there was a big wrong way in the 20th century. And so I just wanted to let you know that that's something that I came to realize, and it really affected me, because I didn't know. I absolutely didn't know that. There's no question there, but sorry, there's no question there. I just wanted to share that with you.
No, yeah. And I love that comment, because I always say that within my presentations when I provide trainings to companies. I always continue to say and repeat the history, because if everyone had that thought process from the past, they would look at me as normal. They would look at me as somebody who's talking in a different language. But now with access to technology, you think that you can make things easier for deaf people, but you could also destroy the language in some different way. So if you actually truly know the history, you respect the language a little bit more. And so that's what means a lot to me, that you even mentioned it yourself without me even having, or any deaf person having to explain that to you. You learned that and acknowledge that. So that's a very, very powerful thing.
The second thing that I thought about was how small the deaf community is and how small Hollywood is. Okay. And because that's what you're talking about with this podcast, is we're talking about deaf community, deaf culture, and then Hollywood. And Hollywood / the entertainment industry, and they're both very small communities. so small, in fact, that in the last year, I feel like I've met so many people in the deaf community in Hollywood, and it just happened lightning speed because the communities are so small. But I think that because they're small, there's an opportunity there. I think that there's an opportunity there to really make a change and to again, I'm not going to say make a huge change because I don't know how fast it will happen, but to start making small changes that hopefully can make a big difference at some point.
For sure. By just having this conversation with you is literally making a difference within our community and Hollywood, because I love this conversation. It opens up different perspectives and understandings, and it's how we can make it a better place for everyone.
And I think what you just said really wrapped up this whole conversation and interview with you. You really brought to light a lot of wonderful comments, perspectives, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your stories and listening to us and supporting us and encouraging many other deaf people to get out there and tell their stories. So we really appreciate having you on this show and this episode. And yeah, thank you.
I want to know, have you guys had, Carly, have you had your sister on as a guest in season 2? Because
I want to.
do you what do we have to do
waiting
with
for the
your
right
sister?
time to have her here?
No, I just think that again, this is me as a fan of the show, is your relationship with your sister, and obviously that that the boundaries of being a sister, being an interpreter, hearing deaf. I mean, I think that would be, this is just me as a fan. I would love to watch and listen to that episode.
But me as a sister, I definitely want to have my sister on this podcast so that everybody can see that I am the best sister. I'm the awesome one in the family. But no.
My question is, how small deaf culture is, and not deaf culture, how small the deaf community is. Does it feel like you know who every single deaf person is? Like, not actually, but does it feel that way? Like, yeah, that's my question. Does it feel that way?
Yeah, it really does. And for me, I have to realize there's a bigger population than I realized. Like, my deaf community I feel is so small, but it's not. It shouldn't. So I feel like my representation of who I want to be becomes even more insecure, because I feel like everyone's going to know my secret. Everyone's going to know my insecurities. Like, I feel like I can't, like, sometimes I feel like I walk on eggshells because I feel like I know everyone. I don't want to do the wrong thing, and I don't want to represent my community in a horrible way. But I realize there's so many people that are also like me. There's so many other people out there that I don't even know. And through this podcast, season 1, we've reached out to so many other deaf people that I have no idea who they are. And I'm like, oh, there's more people than just who I know. So it gave me more of a relief and know that there's beautiful people out there that I have yet to meet. So,
Well, for me, my whole family is deaf. We live in Nebraska in the middle of nowhere. So everyone knows me as, oh, you're Lloyd Wyer's daughter, right? Or, you're Mac Wyer's sister, Mac Wyer's little sister. And so I was always known as my family's little daughter amongst our friends. And so my community, who mainly use American Sign Language, who are deaf, it is very small in the Midwest and then later I moved to DC for Gallaudet University. Again, Gallaudet University, my circle expanded, but still everybody knew everybody. And then now I moved to LA, and it's continuing to grow, but it still feels very small. And I still find those connections when I go to different states. But I personally love it. I love traveling. And so that's a huge privilege for me to be able to travel to other countries and connect with other deaf people through deaf people that I know here. So I think that's really a beautiful thing. Like, it's kind of like a secret society thing we have within our communities.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's just one of those things where again, specifically deaf Hollywood, everyone knows each other, all actors. There's, as you know, that's what we're working on, is getting more shows. But it's like, if I say, hey, do you know the deaf actor that was on that show? It's like, yeah, you probably, of course, you know all of it. It's like, that's how small the community is. And so, anyway, it's fascinating.
I am hoping to expand that too, because I want to see more deaf actors out there. I want to see more deaf writers out there, directors, more deaf talent in general out there. I don't think there's enough. I want to see the community not be so small. I want to see more expansion and see different types of deaf people within the industry.
And I'm working on it. Again, I'm just
So
one
are we.
person. Yeah,
Same.
exactly. I'm just one person, and but I am looking at adding the deaf characters, deaf writers, deaf crew to my productions, and that's something I'm working on. But as you know, this entertainment industry is already pretty hard to get projects off the ground and going. I also have some projects that might be international, and then you have obviously more than American Sign Language. You have sign languages from other countries. And I'm sure you covered that in season 1, I forget, but about how American Sign Language is not international. There's actually hundreds of sign languages all over the world. And so it's exciting to see, hopefully we can all make a change together.
And I cannot thank you enough for working on that and trying to figure out how to open opportunities for the deaf community within the entertainment industry. I really do appreciate you as a person. You're awesome as well. So thank you so much for your time, for listening to our podcast and being part of our podcast as our guest today. And it warms my heart.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course. And also to our listeners, if you guys have any questions that you want to find out or reach out to us for anything, please email us at questions@whatthedeaf.com.
Or you can follow us on our Instagram page, What the Deaf. Also, Ben, how can our listeners find you?
I don't post much, but I'm on Instagram and Twitter, Ben Shelton Films.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you again for everything in this conversation. Really appreciate you. And to our listeners, we'll see everyone next week. Bye, guys.
Bye. We would like to thank dpan.tv and their services at aslcaptions.com for making the transcripts and captions of this podcast accessible for everyone.
If you're looking for captioning or transcript services, they do amazing work.